Hey everyone, this is Chris with Console Customs. Today I'm going to be taking you through the installation of our Xbox Series X/S Rapid Fire mod. This installation also works for our Programmable remapping mod. For any of our Xbox Series mods, there are some tools you're going to need and some optional tools that may also be helpful. Since these mods are soldered in, you're definitely going to need a soldering iron with some solder. I recommend a soldering iron that's around 30 watt, or if you have an adjustable temperature soldering iron, something set around 300 to 350 degrees Celsius. You will also need some tools to open your controller. So we sell as options with all of our kits the screwdrivers you'll need a Torx T8 security bit. That's the kind with the hole in the tip. And you also need a Torx T6. So these can be purchased with our kit. We'll use those to open our controller today. Also, with any of our kits, we also include wire for installing the mod and or optional buttons and paddles. And we also include some desoldering braid, which is just helpful if you get solder somewhere you don't want it. And this is useful to remove that. And we'll try and do a quick demonstration of that later. You may also want a pair of wire strippers. If you don't have wire strippers, you can always just melt the end of the casing off of the wire with your soldering iron. That works. Potentially you might want a pair of small pliers or some different types of tweezers, straight or curved, just to help hold and move things around. If you are planning to install buttons or paddles, you will also need some drill bits, various sizes. We'll kind of go over those in just a second when we look at some different button or paddle options. And also, you're probably going to want a hot glue gun so you can add those buttons. Paddles don't require it, but the buttons will. So as far as buttons and paddles, we offer two different sizes of buttons. So we have this smaller 6mm button and a larger 12mm button. For the 6mm button, you will need a 9/64 inch drill bit. You can also use a 1/8 inch drill bit. For those metric guys, that's a 3.5mm drill bit that you'll need. For the 12mm button, bigger drill bit. That's a 9/32 or 7mm drill bit. And for our paddles, we have four button paddles. So these just will mount on the back of the controller, which puts the buttons on the outside. A lot less drilling and installation required. We'll probably go over installing one of these as we're doing this installation. But for one of these paddles, we need a small 3/32 inch drill bit. Metric, that's 2.35mm, so probably around a 2.5mm drill bit is what you'll need metric wise. Alright, let's go ahead and get into this controller. So to get this controller open, we need to remove the battery cover, and we also have to remove these two small side covers here. So you could use a plastic pry tool to get in there, but these are pretty tight, so it works best just to get in there with your fingers and pop these out. You do have to put a little bit of effort into them, but they'll pop off there. Set those aside, and that brings us to the screws we need to remove. So there are 5 of those Torx T8 security screws in there that we need to remove. So we'll go ahead and get these out. Alright, now this 5th one is behind the label. This controller's already been opened before, so you can see we kind of just poked a hole right in there with a screwdriver, and you can unscrew that one. Usually that likes to just end up staying there behind the label, which is fine. Now we can go ahead and remove the back cover. Put that aside for the moment, and the front just comes right off as well. So we've got our board here. We are going to need to remove the thumbsticks. So we'll just flip that over and pop those off. And now there are two T6 Torx screws in the corner of this back board here that we need to remove. Okay, so with all of our screws removed, we can start to take this controller apart a little bit more. First thing we'll need to do is pop off these two antennas off the little plugs, so we can just again use our fingernail to pop those two guys off. Just move them up out of the way, and this top board just pops off now. There's one plug that connects that. To make our installation a little easier, we are going to remove these 4 rumble motor wires. So we'll just go ahead and remove these guys. Alright, now we can just take and flip this board out of the way. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, we can go ahead and start installing our mod. So if we take the mod here, we need to just kind of bend it in half in the center section, and we are working with this small area right here, which is going to make a bunch of solder connections right around this small black IC down here. So it kind of just fits in the corner and lines up a bunch of the small pads there right to the mod, so we can make those solder connections. So I am going to just make a couple of those and then bring it up close to show you what it looks like, and we'll finish it off. It does help to add a little bit of solder to these pads on the mod, especially the first couple that you want to solder, so we're not trying to hold too many different things at once. Okay, so I have the connections soldered for down and Y. So let me just show you here. You can see all these other connections just kind of line right up with the pads on the mod. So we need to go ahead and just make all of those other solder connections everywhere you see one of those little half circles cut out, and then we can move on to the next section. Okay, so over here we have all of our connections soldered, and we have one more down here on this other small arm, so that one lines right up as well, and then we'll have to run one wire for our LB connection over here. So we have our LED connection made, and then we are going to run one wire from this pad right here up to LB in the corner up here. To make this connection for LB, what we will want to do is just tin this pad with some solder to start with, and we'll do the same thing for the connection up here in the corner for LB. Just going to add some more solder to that. And then we'll just take a small piece of wire, strip both ends. One end there. Just going to go under this antenna wire and the other side to our pad. There we have it. That's our LB connection. Alright, now we are done with the bottom part of this mod. So we can go ahead and flip this back over, but we're going to need to put our headphone jack back in first. Just going to keep the board, mod board out of the way. Get that back in there. And we can go ahead and put our two T6 screws back in, and also solder back up our rumble motor wires. Okay, so we have our rumble motors soldered back up, our board screwed back in. Now, the mod, as you can see, just kind of will follow the board, flip right over top, and the next two connections we want to make is our ground and our right thumbstick click. So those two nice big pads are what we want to solder, and that's going to hold the board in place right where we want it. Okay, we have those two soldered, and the last one that makes the connection directly to the board is for the right trigger, which is this little guy up here in the corner. So we're just going to solder that to the pad that's right there. Just like that, and now we have to make a few connections with some wires. So we need to make a connection for B and our signal wire and our positive voltage, left trigger, and left thumbstick click. Okay, now we need to make our final connections with the wires. So just like the other one, we are going to just tin all the spots we need to solder to. So we'll put solder on all these pads, and then where they are going. So the B is going to this TP41 right up here. That SG connection will go to the top leg of this small sensor right here. And our power will go to this one, labeled TP7, and our trigger goes to TP68, and then the L3 or the left thumbstick click goes to this small pin up here. So this is the leg of the thumbstick click. Alright, so now we can start making those connections. Alright, so that is the 3 for that side. And now we can do the B and SG connections. Okay, we have those two. So at this point, if we are installing the Rapid Fire mod, we could technically be done besides just closing everything back up, connecting our antennas back up, and you could use it in the default configuration. Now we can also at this point add some reflex buttons. So we have connections M1, M2, M3, and M4. So those are for reflex buttons. So if you're installing the programmable remap, that's definitely the ones that we want to use to connect. They are also available on the Rapid Fire mod as well. So those buttons allow us to add, or those connections allow us to add buttons or paddles to the back of the controller, so that we can map standard controller buttons to it. So we could have a jump, crouch, swap weapons as buttons on the back of the controller. In addition to that, for the Rapid Fire only, there is a mod button connection here, and what this will allow you to do is have a button on the back of the controller for turning Rapid Fire on and off instead of using the D-pad. So normally with the Rapid Fire mod, you can either double tap left or hold left to pull the trigger to turn Rapid Fire on. To turn on jump shot, you would hold left and press A. Now if you install that mod button, you can just tap the mod button to turn Rapid Fire on, or hold the mod button and press A to turn on jump shot. So it just takes the control off the D-pad, so you don't accidentally turn things on or off. So as we go further today, I'm going to show you how to install one of our 4-button paddles. That way we'll connect with M1, M2, M3, and M4. Before we do that though, we'll just go ahead, before we forget, and connect our antenna wires back up. These just need to be lined up and pushed on the plug. And just down and flatten small creases there in the cord. Alright, just like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and install one of our 4-button paddles. So we've got one of our 4-button paddles here. And when you purchase one of these from us, it also is going to come with a small bag of hardware that's used to mount and a small bundle of wire. So we'll move that controller out of the way for now, and we are going to go to the back of our shell. So basically we want the buttons on there to be face up as how they're labeled. So in the end it's going to fit just like that. Now the best way to line up our holes is just flip it around the other way and set it on the controller, and I like to line it up right with this little divot in the shell there. So I'm just going to center it with that, and you can use a pen or something just to mark where we want to put our holes. I'm just going to put a little divot with my tweezers so I can see where those are, and we will drill those 2 holes to mount it, and then a third one right in the center to run our wires through into the controller. Alright, again, this is that 3/32 inch drill bit. or for metric that's 2.35 millimeter, or you probably, I don't know if that's an actual size bit in metric, but probably a 2.5 millimeter. So we are going to want to drill those two holes. And by using this size drill bit, we can actually get away with just screwing the board right into the shell and not have to use an extra set of nuts on the inside. But if you need to use a larger drill bit, we do include a second set of nuts to screw the paddle on the inside, and I'll show you that when we get there. But we just need to make our third hole right in the middle for running our wires through. Alright, for the next step, we are going to take our paddle and solder our wires. So we've taken our bundle of wire, I've stripped one end. We've got 5 colors, we've got 5 pads. So we are going to solder those up. And just like we've done inside the controller, we will just tan each one of these pads and solder our wires to it. We will need to know which colors went where inside so when we're soldering inside the controller, the main one that really matters is the ground, this G pad. The other ones can really go anywhere, but you might want to just pay attention which colors you're soldering to which pad, so we get those correct on the inside. Okay, so we have our 5 wires soldered. Just going to take and kind of bundle those up, twist them up because they will end up going through that center hole. Okay, with our wires soldered, we can move on to being able to mount it. So we're going to take our small bag of parts. In there we've got some screws, some nuts, some washers, and what we want to do is just take a screw and probably just start with one washer and nut. We're just going to screw that on there. So we include a few washers so you can basically change the height of the paddle. So if you want it closer, you can remove the washer. You want it further away, you can add a second washer. Just kind of customize where it's going to go. And if we drilled our holes using that 3/32 inch drill bit, we should be able to just screw this directly into our shell. If not, we can use our second set of nuts so that we can secure it on the inside of the shell with that extra set. Okay, so now we can take our paddle and we are going to run these wires through the center hole. Make sure we have button 1 and 2 towards the top, and we can put those in there in our holes and screw those in. They're nice and tight. Now we can see how those paddles line up. So got a nice click, but if you want them tighter or further away, you can make that decision and add or remove those washers. So now if we go to the inside of the controller, we've got room here that if we need to, we we can add the second set of nuts. I'm going to hold that and screw that in if that's what you need to do. So there, we've secured it on the inside with our second nut. Just do the same with the other one. Again, you should really only have to do this if you drilled those holes a little too big. Alright, now we can go back to our controller, and what I end up doing is just cutting these wires so they're only as long as we need them, and remembering that we used the white one as our ground. So if we look at all these pads for M1 through M4, there is one round pad and one square pad. So we'll use one of those square pads. All the square pads on here are ground pads, so we can just use any one of those square pads, and that's where we'll solder our white wire to, and then the round pads we'll just solder one of the wires of the other colors from our paddle. So we'll do the same thing again. We've done with all of our connections, and tin those pads. So I'm going to tin the ground pad of M4, we'll use that one, and the rest we'll just tin the round pad for our signal wire. So we'll take two of these, we'll cut them a little bit shorter for our M3 and M4, and the other two have got to go a little further, so we'll cut those a little longer for M1 and M2, and then we just need to strip each one of those. Okay, so we've got those wires stripped, and we can go ahead and just solder them to the pads. Alright, and just like that we are done. So now we can just go ahead, finish up, close up the controller. We just need to make sure all these wires stay out of the way of everything while we're putting it back together. Alright, we can go ahead and put our thumbsticks back on. Grab the face of our controller. Put that on, and again we just need to make sure these wires all stay out of the way. And one thing you want to pay attention to are these two tabs for the batteries to make sure that they don't end up inside the controller. Make sure our triggers, bumpers, everything works. We can start putting all of our screws back in, and we'll start right with this center one. Alright, with that done, we can put our side covers back on. Just snap on. And replace our battery door, and we're all done. Paddles, Rapid Fire mod or Programmable Remap mod, you're all set to go. You can find our Xbox Series mods as well as all of our other mods on our website, consolecustoms.com, as well as on eBay and soon to be Amazon. On our website you can also find discounts for bulk purchases of our mods, as well as all of our installation and user guides. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us a line through our contact form. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.